These 13 verses are just that. They are snapshots of things that are to come in the days ahead. Now, when we study prophecy, whether it's in the book of Revelation or we're going back to Ezekiel or any of the other Old Testament prophecies and all that, it is important for us to know a couple things. Number one, that we should know that prophecy does not follow a chronological order. We are linear people. We love to open up a book, and when we're reading a book, we like to say, okay, I'm reading a book. I'm going from A to Z. I get it. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's all synchronized. It fits my little brain just well. Well, I'd love to tell you that that's the way prophecy works, but it doesn't. And the way that I have described this in days gone by is that when we get to Revelation here, as we go through this book, and even this chapter, that it's like there's a play being displayed before us. Okay, we're in a drama. There's a drama, and there's this scene is taking place, and then all of a sudden the curtains come close. Behind the events, the scene changes, and the curtains open again, and it's like, wait a minute, what just happened? We were in a park, and now we're in the kitchen. That's just kind of how prophecy works. And so, with the prophetic writings, because they're not in chronological order, they actually provide us with what is called a big picture lens. We get a big picture scene, and in this scene, they're revealing themes across a period of time. So the book of Revelation is just like that. Again, it's a big picture lens, and through that lens, it's revealing themes over the segment and choruses of time. There's time periods, and back in Revelation chapter 7, we've already talked about the 144,000. We've came to a point of understanding or realizing that these are 12,000 people, 12,000 Jews from the 12 different tribes, and these are who God has set apart for a very particular thing. And when we come here to this portion of Revelation 14, we're getting a different look, a different behind-the-scenes look about something, but I don't want you to be confused as we go through these 13 verses, because we are going to zigzag just like this through some various things. We're going to take it in such a way as that I hope that you capture the point, but more importantly, I hope that you capture some type of application for your life, and that you're stirred up in the faith for yourself. Because these things, where's the church as we look at these things? The church is in heaven. That's right. It's in heaven. It's not on the scene. So all of this stuff, we're not going to be walking through and experiencing this stuff on earth. Let me also say this about Revelation, because it's been a while since we've really been in the thick of this, is that when it comes to understanding the book of Revelation, we have to understand that God did not give us this book to satisfy our curiosity about future events. To the contrary, maybe to many people or many ways that Revelation is taught, this is not to satisfy the curiosity that we have about what will take place on this earth when the church is gone, when the body of believers are gone. That's not what this is about. This is about, instead, that God is encouraging believers. He's stirring them up, but he is also warning the rebellious. A very, very, very important distinction that we need to make, because when we read the scriptures, when we read through this, perhaps you remember, those of you that have been here through this whole study, perhaps you remember back when we were in, chapter 7, 8, 9, somewhere in that range, and we started talking about all the demonic activity that was taking place on earth and the different judgments that were opened up and so forth. And man, we came across a very dark chapter. It was so ominous. It was crazy, smoke coming out of the bottomless pit and all that stuff. Listen, that absolutely has a place in the scope of Revelation, to stir up believers to go, oh, come on, Jesus, and to put the fear of God in the rebellious. And that's super important to note that. Why? Well, because without the consequences of sin, oftentimes the grace of God falls upon us in a way that it becomes cheap grace, and we just neglect it. It's like, well, what does this matter? Who cares? What's the big deal? I don't want to be a religious person that just goes to church. I don't want to be this person that does all that religious stuff, because there's too much fun to have. The Bible tells us in the book of Hebrews in chapter 11 with Moses, that Moses put aside the passing pleasures of sin, and he stayed devoted to the purposes of God. When we preach, when we teach, when we share the gospel in its full scope, the gospel, it's good news, right? Well, what's the good news? You have to give the bad news before you can give the good news. The bad news is that man's on his way to hell. The bad news is that apart from Christ, everybody is going to sizzle and burn and smoke. We're going to see a little bit of that tonight, for all of eternity, right? There's a miserable future for those that don't know Christ. And the power of the gospel message, the good news, is understanding just that without Christ, while I might get away with a lot of stuff, here today, and I may not see all those grave consequences, but yet what lies ahead is a very devastating, tormenting time when this body dies. And we don't always think in terms like that, right? Because here I sit at 50 years old and going through my life at 50 years old, and I read the scriptures. Maybe we'll read one tonight. That talks about, I might live to 70 or 80 years old. Well, I still got 25 years left, maybe 30 years at the best. Who knows? And I'm not always thinking of the immediacy of, well, goodness, man, my life could be over at any second. A dear sister in this very fellowship a couple weeks back, she came here one Sunday, a couple days later, well, I guess nearly a week later, walking on the sidewalk, coming home from picking up her groceries at the store, and got run over by a drunk driver. Now she's in the presence of the Lord, just like that. Why, it's a tragic event. Nobody expects to go home, and for that to happen. And the safety that the believer has is, man, it is not all doom and gloom, because my last breath here is my first breath there. Beautiful. And I think most of us get that here in this room. And I'm not sure what the online audience looks like tonight, but I want to make sure that I'm sharing across a spectrum that hits a spectrum of people. Not only building up the believers right now, but encouraging those that are following from afar, or perhaps that don't even know. We don't always share the stats, but but between right now and what took place last Wednesday night, man, we had real live people come to faith in Christ right here in this service, and the summary of stuff that was going on is online. Amazing. So I want to be sensitive about that. And so, anyways, back to this chapter. Okay, chapter 14. This chapter is divided into two distinct things. We're covering the first half, obviously, first 13 verses here, okay? And with that, the preview of coming events. All of this stuff, once again, it's future. There's a list on the screen here I want to go through. These are some of the previews that we're going to see in this. Number one, we're going to see a remnant of Israel that is gathered to Jesus, okay? This is verses 1 through 5. We're going to see that. The next thing that we're going to see in verses 6 and 7, and that is that the gospel goes global. And it's amazing the way that this is done, because God does it with an angel. That's a pretty exciting topic. And fellows in the men and women in the media booth, make sure you're leaving these things up on the screen long enough so folks can write them down. The third one is this, is that the foretelling of Babylon's fall. In other words, the implosion or the collapse of this new world system that's coming, and we're going to see the futility of that and how the angel foretells the collapse of all that. The fourth thing is that we're going to see a final warning given to Earth's population in verses 9 to 11. There's a choice to be made, and the heralding of this from the angel is going to come forward. And the final thing that we see in verses 12 to 13 is there's a promise for the tribulation saints. And so that's a high-level look at this particular chapter, or these 13 verses, I should say. But as we move forward and we tackle this thing, I want to point a key point out for believers, okay? It's nothing more. Maybe we could do this. Maybe we can just focus on the reward, the inheritance, that as believers in Jesus Christ that we are going to receive. Because all of the stuff that we go through in this chapter, again, it's a prophecy. It's looking forward, and we're not going to be around. But this stuff can stir us up. Psalm 84 and 2, New Living Translation on the screen, it says this. It says, I long, yes, I faint with longing to enter the courts of the Lord. With my whole being, my body, and my soul, I shout joyfully to the living God. Matthew, Jesus says this in Matthew chapter 5. He says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Church, there is something to be said about having our hearts stirred up towards Jesus and for the things of God. And that has been that's been one of those things that have been so devastating here over this last year of COVID, because so many of the things that the church does, the church gets together. We stay committed to going through the scriptures. We stay together in fellowship, which is the breaking of bread and prayers and all of this stuff. All of these together times, if you will. And if one thing has just rifled this particular church, it's the aspect of relationships. It's the aspect of people being crippled by fear to even come into the setting of this. And it's not a big church. I mean, we're able to seat like 200 people in this room. And we don't even get that, right? Okay, because of whatever is going on. All that to be, I'm saying all that for this particular reason, is that the stirring up of our hearts, man, that's why, I made the announcements of a men's retreat. I made the announcement here earlier of a women's fellowship night. We're starting to just step out and try to redo those things in a small capacity right now, but they're important. From the retreats to the small groups to fellowship here on a weekly basis on Sunday, man. When the body comes together, it is absolutely beautiful. Let's put that into a language that many or most of you have already heard. Let's think about this, when it comes to camping, right? We make a fire, we make a bonfire. I'm a guy that goes hunting in the fall, and in late October, in those nights in the mountains, it is stinking cold. And we make the most ragingest fire. In fact, my little grandson, he continues to, little Joshua, he's 12, 13 years old, something like that. He's in charge of throwing all the logs and all the sticks that he can possibly get onto that fire to keep that baby raging. But you know what happens. When one of those logs rolls out of the fire or falls off, we make the little teepee thing and it falls down to the side. What happens to that sucker? It goes out. It turns a little gray, right? It's not burning as bright. And that's the same thing that happens, man. Listen, when we allow the intensity of burning bright through fellowship and staying close and staying in those relationships here within church and all of that stuff, our walk with Jesus has the tendency to diminish. And it's not that we have changed. Like a log falls off of the core of the fire. It's still log. It's still there in the fire. It's got a little something going to it, but it's not that raging inferno. When we look at Luke 24 on resurrection morning, and we see that Jesus walked with two disciples that were so discouraged, walking to the village of Emmaus, about 7 miles outside of Jerusalem. And when he walked with them, he unfolded the scriptures to them. Gang, catch this. For you as Christians, catch this. It is the unfolding of the scriptures that God works by his Spirit supernaturally to stir the affections of our heart. And the translation of that being walked out within our life as we get together with the other logs, the other burning members that are on fire as well, we are kindled one to another. And staying close, we're able to burn bright. And it doesn't mean that if you fall off to the side, be it in the fire example or in your life as a Christian, it doesn't mean that you're not a Christian, okay? But what it does mean is that most likely you will diminish because the body needs each other. We are to assemble for that purposes. All that to say this, that as we go through this chapter, as we go into these particular things, listen, we're going to see the doom of the people that have no appetite at all for God. There's zero appetite within the bandwidth of their life for the Lord. And what do they choose, rather? Well, they're choosing an allegiance to a system that totally rejects the persons and the ways of God. That's the choosing of their allegiance. And God is just making sure that they understand that as he sends an angel to herald a message through the heavens, through the skies, as you and I would call them, okay, right? We're not talking heavens as in the throne room of God. We're talking heaven in the sense of where the birds fly, okay? Just through the airwaves here, if you will. And God causes that message to be heralded. Take a look on the screen here. I want to show you some brevity of something. Psalm 90 here, verse 10, 11, and 12. The psalmist says this. He says, 70 years are given to us. He says, some even live to 80, but even the best years are filled with pain and trouble. Did you get that? Even the best years are filled with pain and trouble. Soon they disappear and we fly away. Who can comprehend the power of your anger? Your wrath is awesome as the fear you deserve. Teach us to realize the brevity of life so that we may grow in wisdom. Gang, when we go through the book of Revelation and we see all of these things that are ahead, man, may the same thing be for us. May we understand how to number our days wisely. May we gain a heart of wisdom for seeing and going, wait a minute. As I persevere and I stay close to the Lord and I stay in the Lord, that there's great reward for faithfully serving God over the course of my life, whether it has been for many days or a few days, whatever it turns out to be for you personally. But the idea and the understanding that when we go through Revelation is that, again, we're seeing all the devastation that is being poured upon a God-rejecting world and people fighting with their maker. Now turn that back around to you for just a second, okay? I'm not going to poll the audience either in this room or online, but I will just make a general statement. Most likely, as we get together and we gather physically and we gather online and all this stuff, that there's usually somebody that is watching that doesn't know the Lord, that has wandered from the Lord, that is under some great condemnation from God, or any of a number of things. And because I'm thirsty and I heard your water bottle there, my mind got distracted. Immediately, I went to the point of thinking about water. Now, what shall I do with myself? I'm going to get me some water real fast. Jody, throw me that water bottle. Doug has completely destroyed the working of the Spirit. My mind just went completely blank. All right, security tackle Doug next time. All right, Doug, now I'm getting water. Praise the Lord, I lost the thought. All right. I have no idea what I was talking about prior to that. Psalms 90 is a great psalm. May we number our days and may we be wise about it. Maybe this is why I shared that. CDC, vital statistics, November 2018. Okay, here's what they put forward. The average life expectancy of the United States is for a man is 76.2 years. For a woman, it's 81.2 years. And so there is real value in doing what I have done as a youth. I made sure that I tracked down an older woman to love me and to love. So I'm just trying to balance out the end scales here a little, okay? But that's the last time they've taken vitals, they've done the study on the vital statistics and all that stuff, was November 2018. And it's quite fascinating because as you look into that particular psalm and you see that, the only point I think that we're to take away from that, and even as we read this chapter, is that life is short. And we should understand that in the brevity of life, that man, we have to stay attentive to the plan of God. We have to. And some days we don't feel like staying attentive to the plan of God, but we have to stay attentive to the plan of God. And in these first 5 verses that we just read here in chapter 14, this look behind the scenes that we've gotten is that, Jesus comes back, Mount Zion, he stands in Jerusalem, okay? And there's 144,000 Jews that are gathered to him at a later point in time. Don't miss the flow of this, as I told you earlier, the snapshots of what we're looking at in this prophecy as we move our way through it. It is not chronological, gang. It is not, right? Because as we've gone through some of the seals, we've been in that place where they're chronological. It's like, okay, we're here 3.5 years in. We're over that 3.5 year point. Now we're in the Great Tribulation part, and we're going to come back to some of that stuff. But we've been able to more easily go through the ebbs and flows of that. That's not where it's at right now. In this parenthetical chapter here of chapter 14, we're moving all over the place. And the remnant here, these 144,000 Jews, we know, as we've already studied, this is not the church. Where's the church at one more time? Church is in heaven, that's right. So let's observe some truth and let's make a little application here to our life, okay? In verses 4 and 5, these 144,000 Jews, they're noted for something, okay? Again, as we read down through this, we saw that they were not defiled with women, okay? We also saw that they were redeemed. We saw that in verse 5, that their mouth, that there was no deceit that was found within their mouth and all of this stuff. They were without fault before the throne of God. Well, what do we know from all of that? Well, we know that their moral purity and their walk of integrity with God, that it was something that was real. Now, if you think about the time frame in which they're walking this out, it's on the time of the Great Tribulation, okay? This is the time that these guys have walked, and that time is the most intense and it's the most corrupt time that the world will ever see in the entirety of world history. And yet, these 144,000 that they were witnesses of Christ, they were demonstrated with their moral purity, their moral excellence, their integrity, and even their ministry for Christ, that these guys became a great evangelistic tool to reach the nations around the world. Amazing and awesome. How does that encourage us right now? Listen, we are in a time of stretching. We are in a time of persecution where there's that hostility and that harassment of the church and or traditional or conservative values, whatever the label is that you want to put on it. All that stuff is being played out in a very real capacity right now. And yet, as we look through the pages of Scripture, that we do not have to fall prey to the Scriptures. We can continue to remain and to walk faithfully by the power of God's Holy Spirit, by the light of His Word. What's something else that's going on? Daily, we see this on the news. Daily, we see this on our social media feeds, that more and more people and more organizations are sidestepping truth because they're afraid of getting caught in that vortex of the canceled culture. Right? Where you're completely eliminated off of social media, be it Twitter, be it Facebook, whatever. Even businesses, right? Your business can't drive the things that you want to drive because you're being throttled back or marginalized in some capacity. And there's a lot of people that are in fear of this stuff. As the church, it's a very real factor for us. And I would publicly share this with you, that last April when this COVID thing started, we began asking the Lord to help us to make a plan so that in the event that cancel culture moves greater and greater upon the church, and I think it will in days to come, that we still have the ability to broadcast these messages out without getting on the main portals. Now, I will tell you that we're not entirely there. So if somebody wants to shut us down tonight, well, good luck. We'll be back up tomorrow. So all this to say is that there are organizations that are helping us right now, and not just us as a church, but the church at large, to be able to broadcast without being shut down by AWS, without being shut down by any of these other places that host and allow you to process and to publicize videos and all of this stuff, right? Like YouTube and all that. And so I don't want to pound the drum of a conspiracy theory stuff, but I do want to say this, that if God is for us, who can be against us? That's what Paul said. If God's for us, who can be against us? And listen, the message is going to get out. And in verse number 4, these 144,000 Jews that were chosen by God, they stayed true through the Great Tribulation. And if these guys, by the Spirit of God, can stay true in the Great Tribulation, you and I can stay true in these last days, because we're not at the same level of persecution that is going on. And that's an encouragement for us. That helps us. It's a perspective in that. It's like, okay, I got an aim now. I get it, man. I can stay true, and this is how I can do that. I know how to walk this out. Now, as we go on, and we see verses 6 and 7, we're going to transition. Okay, so we're moving away from the 144th. We're switching over to a different portion here at this point. Here's what it says. John says, "Then I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on the earth, to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people, and saying with a loud voice, 'Fear God and give glory to Him, for the hour of His judgment has come, and worship Him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and springs of water.'" And so in these two verses here, we have an angel that comes on the scene. And this angel, he takes the gospel globally, okay? There are those groups that say that the church has got to evangelize the entire world before Jesus will come back. And then you read the book of Revelation and you realize that, wait a minute, that's just not true. Because God's going to get the job done with angels. So what we miss, God gets, right? So He's got our back, He's got His plan, and He's going to work it out the whole entire time. And now this is not new information, right? Because in Matthew chapter 24, verse number 14, when the disciples were on the Mount of Olives and they're talking to Jesus, asking about the end times and asking about, those three different questions and seeing what it would look like, Jesus says this. He says that the gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all nations, and then the end will come. Now, here we see this. We see the angel flying through the sky, ministering the gospel. And that's a beautiful picture there. And so, again, it's not the work of man. It is the work of God. And God is going to use whatever he needs to use to get the message out. And so nobody's going to slip through the cracks, although I will say this is applicable then in the future, and it's applicable right now, is that everyone, man, woman, and child, we all have free will. We all have a free choice as to what we're going to do with our life. We have the opportunity to choose him or to not to choose him. And many times the way that God works in our lives and through our lives is that we're the hands and the feet, right? We're casting the net. We're going out. We're telling other people. We're inviting them to church. And the act of evangelism or making disciples, if you will, it's not like just a one and done thing. In fact, it's probably not the right thing to do to immediately advance to a gospel-driven salvation right this second. I've known you for 2 minutes, but you got to repent right now and accept Jesus. Listen, if you get that radical intense with somebody, they're going to look at you like you're a freak, and you probably are a freak. Okay? Please understand, it's like it's life on life, right? It's relationship over the course of time. That God gives you the opportunity to pour into people and to win them to Jesus and to point them to Jesus and all that stuff. So your acts of discipleship, my acts of discipleship, Jody and I, we've been trolling now for right about 5 years in one of the local fitness places that we go to and some of the triathlon stuff that we do prior to the shutdown of COVID. I don't know what weight class I'm in now, but I was in a lower one earlier. It was good then. I'm sharing this with you is because the opportunity to speak truth into people's life, it comes over the course of time. It's not just a one and done. Sometimes God will give you a one and done, and sometimes there'll be something really cool that he does. But many times it's those shared relationships over time that gives you the opportunity to speak truth into somebody's life and to invite them and say, hey, man, come to church with me, man. And you flip them out a card and hey, you're invited to church. Or you send a text message, hey, I'm praying for you, right? That's the active stuff that you guys are doing as a church. Hopefully you're doing this as a church to play your part of making disciples and being a part of the Great Commission and being the hands and feet of Christ on this earth. And so, anyways, God gives those avenues of opportunity, and as God provides those particular things, it's for us to decide whether we're going to serve him and be blessed or we're not. I've often made this particular joke, and I did it on a Wednesday night. And I think I did it somehow. I think I did it during the Song of Solomon when we taught on that. But I have made this comment that, listen, don't be the person that shows up to heaven in the Speedo. You're the guy that shows up, you're all charred, and the only thing you do is you're standing there in your Speedo because you didn't send anything ahead. Because you didn't walk an obedient life here, because you didn't take those steps of faith now, because you were not a person that served the Lord right now. And there's so many ways that we can serve the Lord by faith. In fact, it's with every area of our life that we have an opportunity to do that. And now you may be a Christian, but you sit stationary, you sit parked, you never get involved, you never do anything. Now, you're Wednesday night, so I'm not talking to you guys because you guys are here. But I'm talking to you guys online. I see you sitting on the couch. Get to church. You ain't been here in a year. So, okay. Hope you understand that. But it's not on you. So don't trip out. You can smile at me. Yeah, I see some of you smile. Don't be so serious. It's just church. God is a God of joy. Anyways, we get an opportunity to choose what we're going to do. Now, second thing here is this. Second angel, I should say, is verse number 8. Here's what it says. It says, and another angel followed, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she has made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The point very simply behind this is the worshiping of other gods, okay? And so this angel, what does it do? It announces the fall of Babylon. What do we know that to be? We know that is the collapse of that new global system that is in place, financial, religious, political, et cetera, right? What was the deal with that particular system? Well, Revelation chapter 13, the previous chapter, at the end of it, there, verse 17, verse number 18, there was that total allegiance that was demanded by the beast, that was demanded by the Antichrist, that was demanded by the false prophet and all of this stuff. And without buy-in to that particular system, people couldn't eat or they couldn't buy and sell. They couldn't do any of that particular stuff. And the crazy thing that is going on, again, is we're moving around. We're jockeying around. This is prophecy. It's not a chronological thing. It's not linear like this. It's just I'm getting information here. I'm getting it over there. I'm switching back over this. And when we see this in this particular thing, there is an announcement that is made that this system is collapsing. We move on, verses 9 to 11. We come to the third angel now. Verse 9, he says, then a third angel, they followed them, saying with a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast and his image and receives his mark on his forehead or on his hand, he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation. He shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever. And they have no rest day or night. Now watch, stop, pause. I don't even think I finished the verse, but we're going to stop right there. That is the bad news. Without that bad news, the gospel message often comes across as something that it's just a cheap grace. People don't respect it. They don't respond to it. They don't understand the implications for not receiving the grace of God. In our culture, our world is so guilty of this. And in this past couple decades, if you will, that we've gone through within the church movement, within America, I'm using church big C, okay? Maybe I should use it as a little c. I'm not sure which way I'm not sure which way I should use that. Maybe I'll put both of them in there. But all of this stuff about, man, we're going to play you the best rock and roll music to pack out this sanctuary, and it's a great concert hall, and we use secular music, and we get you in there, and we just tell you these great things, but there's never a call to repentance and change and service and devotion and dedication. There's never a call to any of that. It is a cheap grace, and it is ripping people off. And they don't understand the full implications of it. And this is why, gang, that those that sit under these types of ministry, that they never grow up into the full maturity of Christians. It's not to say that these organizations don't have mature Christians in there. It's not to say that. But the vast majority of the people that are coming in and they're looking for what does it look like to live a holy life? Well, what does it look like to lay my life down for Jesus? What does it look like to pick up my cross and follow him daily? What does it look like when Jesus said that if I gain my life, or rather if I lose my life for his name's sake, I'm going to find it? What does all of that look like? What does it look like being committed to a body of believers to where I can use the gift that God has given to me? What does it look like for me, I always hear these churches are trying to do these financial drives and everything, but what is my responsibility within the scripture and about the tithing aspect? What do I do with all of that? Listen, we are to build the saints up for the work of ministry, and the whole life becomes one of those things that God is working in and as God is working through. And when it's all about tickling the ears, when it's all about just giving a warm and fuzzy message so you come into church, you're never challenged, but you're always made to feel good. Well, you're a good person, and you should do all this, and, you get the Joel Osteen thing, your best life now, and all this stuff. And that's just, quite honestly, it's a bunch of junk. It's a bunch of junk that just raises nothing more than spoiled, rotten little Christians. And when they get their little toes stepped on, that church is mean, I'm leaving. Well, you have no idea what you have no idea what you're buying into or what you're believing. And I can get very passionate about that because I can see so many people have been ripped off over the course of the years. It's ugly. But this angel, as he goes, this third angel, verses 9, 10, 11, is what he shares. It's like he's giving this final warning of don't take the mark of the beast. It's going to cost you dearly. Remember, he's talking to tribulation saints. Okay? He's talking to people that are in the tribulation, I should say. And what he heralds here, it's like this last hour message, if you will. It's like, this is it. This is the final choice that you're making. Because once you buy into that particular system, remember, we just saw a few minutes ago that system will crash at some point. But as we're moving all around here with this prophecy, it's not linear like this. We're getting a scene, and they're all mixed up, and you get confused by reading it. It's a very ugly picture. So what's the summary of these particular things? Listen, a summary of these three angels is very simple, okay? Random order. But God has an offer. That offer is salvation. The world system is broken. It's broken right now, even before we get to the new system here. And at the end of the day, what's the choice that you're going to make? Three simple things. God has an offer. The world system is broken. What are you going to choose? Now, while it might seem very narrow, well, Jesus said that the gates are narrow and the path is difficult. But he also shared with us that there is a set of broad gates and there's a very wide path, and there's a lot of people that go in there by that. There is a contrast to be made. Not everything with God is doom and gloom. I don't mean it that way. In fact, there's a lot of wonderful things that God has given to us that we should rejoice greatly over and be encouraged by. But we have to understand the full scope and the full balance of the message. That without the bad news, there is no good news. There's no gospel without that. It's a cheap grace. It's a cheap gospel. And you just go on and just live the way you want to live. There's no holiness that is attached to it, if you will. There's no growing in the grace and knowledge of Christ. No sanctification of the life. And so the cup of God's wrath, it's been satisfied. How? For anybody that places their faith, their hope, their trust in Jesus Christ and the work that he's done. And as we place our faith, our hope, our trust in Christ, what do we have? First, we have peace with God, and then we have the peace of God. Those are two important things that I think that we talk about, quite frankly, very often as a church. Okay, fine. Maybe so much that we can go to that place that we can take it for granted. But I'll tell you what, when I roll the clock back nearly 30 years now, and I had that gun in my mouth on May 7th of that night, about 8 p.m. when I got saved, I'm telling you that peace with God is what I needed. Because I was so condemned, and I was so confused, and I was so just tore up from my own ways. And while it might preach kind of easy, it's like, well, we have peace with God, and then we have the peace of God. I'm telling you that when you're the person that is receiving the gospel message and you're hearing somebody share the love of God with you, that yes, your sins can be forgiven. That yes, all of that stuff where you're so guilty before God and guilty before man, and that weight of condemnation is upon you, and that ugliness that is there. When somebody tells you that there's a way to take that off your shoulders by believing in Jesus, and you receive Jesus, and that weight is instantly taken off of your shoulders, this story that I'm giving you, peace with God and peace of God, it is all the difference in the world. And gang, you guys as a church are to take that message out. You are to be sharing that with the people that are in and around your life as you have relationship with people. Hey, some of you will share this every day. Others of you, you might only share it once a year or once every 10 years. I don't know what the volume is. I don't know what the number is. I just know that the church is to be on mission, and there are people that God has placed around our life that need to hear that need to receive the peace of God through Jesus Christ and to have that peace. Well, finally, this section closes out, verses 12 and 13, and this closes our night here for us. John says this. He says, here is the patience, or here is the perseverance, as other translations put it, of the saints. He says, here are those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. He says, then I heard a voice from heaven saying to me, write, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors and their works follow them. And so, a few promises there for the tribulation saints for sure. And maybe it's a good reminder for us as well, okay? Two things on the reminder side. Number one is this, is that, listen, a time is coming when our daily struggles in this world, they're going to end. A time is coming. You know, I read you vital statistics already about the average age of a man, all races. It was just the average age in this country, 76.2. Average age of a woman is 81.2. Okay? If God gives you that long, maybe he gives you more, maybe he gives you less. I don't know, but I do know this, that day is coming when that struggle that we go through in this world is going to end. Second reminder here for the Christian is this, is that our works will follow us into eternity. The times that you serve Jesus are going to be rewarded. The times that you faithfully honored the Lord, and whatever it is, in a scriptural obedience, those times that you did that by faith, you are laying up treasures in heaven. And gang, it could be as something as simple, right? Jesus says, even if you were to give a cup of cold water within his name, the aspect of service is what he's highlighting on. Don't trip on the water in the little styrofoam cup, okay? It's a simple act of service, very simple, very natural, very easy, very compassionate, very within the reach of what you can do. God uses everyday, ordinary people, and he does something amazing in them, and then he does that amazing work through them. We can sit here and whether it's me or you or the church down the road, we can do all these wonderful, great gymnastics, but without the love of Christ within our heart, in the compassionate side, to be willing to do those simple little acts of generosity, simple little acts of service, if you will, that are done by faith. If we don't do those particular things, then, and it doesn't matter, who cares? Who cares what you come in here and you learn? You're just going through the motions of stacking up more information. Information is good in the right vein, but it's not the information, it's the engagement. Are you engaging Jesus Christ? And are you allowing Christ to grip your heart and for that to change your life, for him to change your life? That's the picture. And so as we close here, here's the two actions that I want to send you guys home with, okay? We're as a fellowship, we're moving more and more to simple action things. Very simple. Not crazy stuff, but little simple actions. And we're going to look at them on the screen, okay? First action is this, is that we're to watch for his coming. I'm going to read this out of, I'm going to flip to, Matthew 25, and I'm buying time for myself and the media booth. Matthew 25, verse number 13, NLT. Jesus says this. He says, so you too must keep watch, for you do not know the day or hour of my return. Jesus is saying that. So we're to watch for his coming, okay? Second action item. That was the first action item, was watch for his coming. Second action item is this. It comes out of 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse number 58. Which says this. He says, so, my dear brothers and sisters, be strong and immovable. Always work enthusiastically for the Lord, for you know that nothing you do for the Lord is ever useless. Those are the two action items. Very, very, very simple. And even in the simplicity of what they are, they're totally encouraging, because of the way that the book of Revelation closes, like the very last sentence in Revelation 22 and 21, that John shares this from the Lord. He says, may the grace of the Lord Jesus be with God's holy people. God's attitude towards sinners is that of grace. God's willingness to come alongside, God's willingness to help you and I in any situation that we find ourselves in. He is willing, he is able, he is ready. And the question turns to us is that, will I respond to him by faith? Will I allow God to do that amazing work within my life? Will I allow God to stretch me beyond what I think I am capable of? Will I allow God to work in me to where he brings me into a space to where I'm stretched, to where I'm challenged, to where I'm changed because I'm waiting upon him, because I'm connected to the family, because I love the Lord, I serve the people around me, I serve the people in my community, that my whole life is one gigantic life that God is living in and that God is living through. As we return to a message like that around the globe, across our country, in this fellowship, listen, God does amazing things and people are changed. And I want to make sure that I leave you with that it is the amazing work of God, and he's on the throne, he's active, he knows all the things that are set before us, and he knows the very reason that you and I, that he has created you and I, and he has a purpose. So may we stand together and we pray.
Thanks for joining us today. If you want to know more about having a real relationship with God, click the Do You Know Him link at westminstercalvary.org. We invite you to join us for our regular worship services on Sundays at 9:30 a.m. and Wednesdays at 6:30 p.m. We are conveniently located on the northeast corner of Wadsworth Parkway and Church Ranch Boulevard in the Stanley Lake Marketplace Shopping Center. For more information, please contact our church offices at 303-223-4640. Thanks and God bless.